Greetings, as I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. We are once again diving back into the interesting world of Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. That's what we're doing today. So if you're joining me, of course, live on Twitch, hey, over there on Twitch, you can see them kind of chatting with me. You know, they can ask questions live to me. Hi, Twitch. Always glad to have you here. But of course, the big people to say hi to is you people over on YouTube. Hi, YouTube. Liking, subscribing, ringing the bell, and all those great things are great. And of course, my question is today, have you played a leader role in D&D 4e? Because that's what we're talking about today. If you missed my previous episode on breakdowns of the various actual classes you could play in D&D 4e, I talked about the defenders before. And you can go back and watch that big video on all the defenders I talked about. I'd recommend that. And mainly one of the things that I'm not going to be really talking about today is, of course, the hybrid classes. Because the hybrid classes are linked to defenders. So, well, not linked. They're linked to defenders, strikers, controllers, leaders. What I mean is, the hybrid classes, I went over how they worked in the previous video, so I'm not going to talk about them today. I'm going to talk about all the other class options and a couple that I'm going to summarize a little bit more than others as we talk about. I'll also talk about what books you can find these classes in. So if you want to look up all the actual powers and mechanics, I'm going to go over basics here. I'm going to do what I did last time. We're going to go over basics, abilities, kind of how they work, how it means to be the leader role for that class. We're not going to talk about powers. We're not going to talk about their various, like, Paragon path, Epic's paths, anything like that. I love ads popping up when you're live. Let's talk about clerics. So that's where we're going to start here. And normally, I throw out, those are the books you can check out. But we're not doing that today. I will tell you what book it is. And hey, Player's Handbook 1. The obvious book. This is where we introduced everything. And clerics are a leader. They lead by shielding their allies with their prayer, healing them, using powers, improving their attacks. The defender, as I kind of talked about it, can kind of have healing abilities and kind of have abilities like that. But their idea is the defender is going to be front and center hitting things. You as the leader are going to be, generally speaking, supporting, healing, things like that. Now, they are a divine power source. They're connecting to a deity in this case. Divine can be defined in many ways, but deities directly are a big thing. And kittens are too. So say hi. Interruption cat. Alright. Adventure. Go over that way. They get bonuses to will as there, and they're a 12 hit point at first level plus con score and 5 every other level. Healing surge 7 plus con. Alright. So they invest in divine power. They use prayers and heal companions, and, they can still lead their way with melee. The idea of the mace, the hammer, that kind of crushing things, bashing into their enemies, while having enough armor to defend themselves exists pretty heavily there. They are servants, usually against ruthless, evil deities. Again, there is this juxtaposition on the way things are done in 4th edition, that there is much more of a good versus evil aspect to the alignments, with unaligned in the middle. So it's not like you couldn't be an unaligned cleric, but generally speaking, you're probably going to be one of the 2 good alignments, kicking evil things' asses. The deity goes a long way for helping you, but it really doesn't do a lot for many of your abilities. So the thing is, like, the deity kind of defines how you work, but not how you mechanically work, which is a very interesting thing for a cleric. So the 2 basic builds are Battle Cleric, Devoted Cleric. Again, I'm not going into the builds themselves and how they are defined. They're just choices that if you want to... Basically, they give samples of builds you can use to make your character easy to build. But the actual class features are 4 of them that you get. Channel Divinity, Healer's Lore, Healing Word, and Ritual Casting. Now, I did talk a little bit about Ritual Casting before, when I talked about Defenders. So, if you, again, weren't there for that one. That was dealing with things like the Sword Mage and stuff like that. But the idea of ritual casting, as quickly talking about it, is you have these rituals that are bigger spells in a ritual book that you cast, and they are kind of separate from your normal powers. They're more traditionally closer to spells you would have in the previous editions, and actually what you'd have in 5th edition then, too. That's ritual casting. Now, let's talk about the others. Channel Divinity. It's a once per encounter ability. And this is it filling you with light of your patron, and it invokes special powers. Turn Undead and Divine Fortune are two of the ones that are fairly simple. But again, there are divinity feats which grant other powers to it. And regardless of which one you use, it's still once per encounter. Effectively, you get a couple of like, oh, here's a couple of powers I can use that are channeled, are using my channel divinity. Cool, maybe I'll use those. Or if not, I will, get other features. Again, these are two specific channel divinity class features: Divine Fortune, Turn Undead, and it's just you unlock more of them with feats, and whichever you would use once per encounter. Noting that in Turn Undead, it's what it says it does. Well, it does radiant damage to undead and pushes them away, and they're immobilized then too, and it can increase damage. And then the Divine Fortune is a free action that you can gain a +1 on your next attack roll save before the end of your next turn. So it's interesting. One is like, I damage undead and push them away and immobilize them, take that undead, and the other is I get a little bonus once per encounter. It's not bad, but it's not super great either, it's just kind of okay. The Healer's Lore is an interesting one. When one of your powers heals, or has the healing keyword, may I note, you add your wisdom modifier to the hit points they receive. So yeah, it's you heal more. And then Healing Word is a healing power to go along with that. You can use this power twice per encounter. Interesting note there. But only once per round. And is a minor action. And yes, at higher levels you can use it a third time per encounter. And it makes the target spend a healing surge, but regain additional 1d6 hit points. But remember, you also have your healing ability, which you add your wisdom to. So it's really d6 plus your wisdom plus their healing surge that they're healing. And the amount healed goes up per level to eventually 66. But it's interesting that a lot of healing-based abilities within 4th edition are based on your targets spending healing surges. So rather than, yes, I'm invoking divine energy to draw out that healing ability, but it's basically whatever natural healing ability that person has. I'm only accelerating that using my divine ability rather than calling on divine energy to actually heal them. It's an interesting juxtaposition, and I don't mind it necessarily for a thematic kind of way of thinking about healing a little different, that you're drawing out that natural healing. And you will see when we talk about a lot more leaders, there is a lot more of this idea of having people spend healing surges to heal themselves. It shows up a lot. But again, you can dive into the daily powers, encounter powers, at-will powers to really get a hold of a lot of their abilities and stuff like there. And certainly, healing is a thing that's pretty big for a cleric. It's not the only thing. Little bonuses, protections, and stuff like that really fill in there. But again, a lot of their abilities also do damage. So it is that function of I can still do damage, but I boost my allies. I heal my allies. While the defenders were I'm going to mark my enemy and have them target me in some kind of way. This is, I'm going to heal people. Let's talk about the other from the original Player's Handbook, the Warlord. Now, the Warlord is a martial leader. They're an expert in tactics, have trained, practiced, so they're not calling on any specific powers, but they are still a leader, rather than being like this symbol of a god. They're a military commander. That's the easiest way to think about it. Oh, I forgot to mention Cleric's key ability scores were Wisdom, Strength, and Charisma. A Warlord is Strength, Intelligence, and Charisma. Now they get bonuses to a small bonus to Fortitude and Will, 12 plus Con hit points, 5 per gain per level, 7 plus Con for healing surges. So a warlord is defined by being on the front line, commanding, bolstering allies with weapon in hand. They rally the fight. They kind of turn the tides by being there in the front, and it's the ability to lead others in a lot of ways. There are different stories of how you come about this, like a war chief, a knight, a youthful noble that's trained in military kind of things, a military commander, a marshal of some kind of area, a inspired like mercenary that has turned towards, more martial kind of ways. There's a lot of stories that you can kind of do. And, they're another armored kind of figure just like the cleric that are kind of leading into battle. So they have a... Kitty! If I was editing this more, we'd have cat bloopers. Because Adventure found a box. Now she's out of it. Adventure cat. There are two Warlord builds that if you wanted to look into them, the inspiring and the tactical one. But when it comes to their abilities, they have basically 3 class features. They have Combat Leader, Commanding Presence, and Inspiring Word. Let's talk about each of these. Combat Leader. When you're with an ally, you and each ally within 10 squares gains +2 bonus to initiative. So you can see this is already very different. This is a lot more of a tactical command kind of ability than our Cleric. Our Cleric was doing a lot of healing, can gain a kind of small bonus here and there. On the other hand, Commanding Presence has 2 benefits. And the Inspiring Presence, part of Commanding Presence, is when an ally you see spends an action point to take an extra action, they also regain hit points equal to 1/2 your level plus your Charisma modifier. Now, this is also interesting because it's a healing, but it's not a healing tied to healing surges. But it basically is like, oh, I'm spending my action point to gain an extra bonus. Back when I talked about mechanics of 4E, in an older video, I talked about action points. If you're unfamiliar at this point in time and coming in, go see how to play 4E, my video there, too. It's linked at the end of the video, I'll have the full list of all the videos and stuff like, too. But don't get into that. It's got lemon in it. You are a silly little kitty. I'm going to get this away from you, too. Alright, you can play with that. There. There you go. Don't knock it over. The other part is Tactical Presence. These 2 combined make your Commanding Presence. The Tactical Presence is when an ally you see spends an action point to make an extra attack. So it's the same thing. They also gain a bonus to attack roll equal to 1/2 your Intelligence modifier. Now the thing is, you have to choose one of these. You get one of those 2 following benefits, basically, with Commanding Presence. You're either Inspiring or Tactical. You're not both. So you have to keep in mind which one you want to be. Do you want to be Inspiring? Do you want to be Tactical? Do you want to give someone some hit points? Or do you want to, if they're getting that extra attack, do you want to have them have a bonus equal to 1/2 your Intelligence modifier? Remember, Intelligence and Charisma and Strength and stuff are very good stats. And finally, the Inspiring Word. You use the Inspiring Word Power, which grants your allies resistances. Now talking about the Inspiring Word Power. Alright, come on. You get out of here if you're going to be this naughty. Okay? Oh, don't you dare. Don't you dare. Out from behind the computer. Sorry, everybody. Adventures with Cat. Come on, Adventure. Out. Adventure. 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 Come on. Meow, meow. Adventure. Out. 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 Meow. Out. Out. Out now. Come on. Come on. You see me. Come on. Come on. Yes, you're getting caught on wires, which you shouldn't do. Get out of there. Adventure. Come on. Back out. It's dangerous in there. Oh, shit. This is like comedy of errors. Just a comedy of errors starring me and a tiny kitty. Alright. Now you're just going to be grabbed for a while. Let's go hold on to you. She's in my arms. She knows she's in trouble for being naughty. She's everybody's entertainment today, more than me. Right, Adventure? You're adorable, and that's what you can make up for it for? Yeah. So, Inspiring Word. It's very similar to the healing ability of the Cleric. That's the best way to say it. You can use it twice per encounter, no more than once a round, get a third time of it. It's a minor action, it's a burst. So, similarly to the Cleric, it's the allies can spend a healing surge and heal additional hit points. So, it's exactly the same as the Cleric's ability to heal, except they don't get the wisdom bonus. So, similar to a Cleric, a Warlord calls on a rally and they, like, you know, heal their allies. And I guess in this way, they're inspired to fight regardless of their wounds and rally on to continue into battle. So, kind of a thematically the same, but also different. Oh, quickly, go. Quickly, run that way. But that's basically the concepts behind the Warlord. And the Warlord has some heavy similarities, as I've kind of shown here, to the Cleric. This is going to be something we're going to kind of see for all of the leaders here. Let's talk about bards. Now, we've moved on from the Player's Handbook 1 to the Player's Handbook 2, of course, for this one here. So, again, once again, you're a leader. They've got an arcane source. So, again, we're getting to a third source of power now. And they use their spells to inspire and invigorate allies. And they can also call specific control elements. So, here we're already adding a little bit of that control as a secondary nature when it comes to bards. You can see that plenty of classes mix in little elements of other classes. Like you could have someone that's a little bit of a striker, a little bit of a, you know, defender, a little bit of a controller, little bit of a leader if it's not a leader class normally. Kind of mixed in here. And certainly for bard, they're a little bit more controller mixed in there too. They use words and music to study their channeled magical abilities and mastered kind of lore and sagas. Charisma, intelligence, constitution. Bonuses to reflex and will. 12 plus con, 5, 7 for the healing and hit points based stuff. So, artists, first and foremost, that's a bard. You think about it, it's a bard. They sing, they practice drama, poetry, musical instruments. They make clear sense of how they perceive reality. So they have things like charm magic, illusions, and stuff like that. They know sagas of great heroes in the repertoire that can be inspiring to the very people. And they have a lot of not only artistic lore, but like knowledge of other kinds of lore, and some arcane knowledge too. They get the idea that arcane magic and art generally, where magic and art kind of share this kind of sublime beauty of the two of them. So, for what's the Cunning Bard and the Valorous Bard are the two sample builds. But for their abilities, they in fact have the most we've seen here in quite a while. They have 7 abilities here to talk about. Whew. 7. Let's go over all of these too. They also have implements too, which we should mention. So we're getting to something a little bit more complex than we did before. So, what is Bard? They get Bard training. What does this give you, Bard training? Well, it gives you ritual casting as a bonus feat, allowing you to cast ritual magic and have a ritual book. And it says, additionally, you can perform 1 bardic ritual per day at your level without expending components. Though you should have to pay other costs and use any focuses required for the ritual, and then you get more of them that you can use. But yes. And you also, when you choose your rituals for your ritual book and ritual casting, one has to be a bard as a prerequisite, and then another first level ritual. So you do get this free, you do have to choose a bard ritual that's just a bard ritual. And that one's the one you get for free-ish. So they've got a unique version of ritual casting based also on the feat too. So it's maybe not as deep as having the same kind of class ability as when we talked about the Cleric. Now they then get Bardic Virtue. And they choose one of the following often. You know, it also affects certain bard powers and things like that. Similarly, like the Warpriest's option I talked about, that affects certain powers that you may take. In this case, Bardic Virtue affects certain powers that you may take. And there are 2 virtues you can take, Virtue of Cunning, Virtue of Valor. The Virtue of Cunning is once per round when an enemy attack misses an ally within a number of squares equal to you plus 5 plus Intelligence modifier. You can slide that ally 1 square as a free action. That's a little bit of control. That's taking him to, okay, I'm doing a lot of my other things. I have a little bit of control. I can move an ally around a little bit. Oh, he missed. And the other one, Virtue of Valor, is a little bit more traditional leader. Once per round, when an ally within 5 squares is reduced to 0 hit points or bloodied, reduces an enemy to 0 hit points or bloodies an enemy, you grant them temporary hit points to that ally as a free action, and the number is 1 plus your con modifier, and it goes up as you level. So that's an entire idea of, like, it's not necessarily healing, but it's a boost in some hit points with some temporary hit points. That's a little bit more traditional leader than the little bit of cunning, which adds a little bit of that, you know, control to it. And as we see as 4E developed, a lot more classes added a little bit more elements of things, and we're not so traditional. Our third of 7 power is Majestic Word. So the arcane power of the Bard's Voice can heal allies. They gain the power of Majestic Word. Let's talk about Majestic Word before we go back to the other 4, just briefly. It is dun 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 dun. Guess what? It's the same thing as all the other healing abilities. It's an ally in a burst. They spend a healing surge, regain additional hit points equal to your charisma modifier, in this case, and then can slide the target 1 square. And then as they level up, they also get extra d6s. They only max out at 5d6. So they subtract one of the natural d6s from Majestic Word to make it more unique, and indeed add that 1 square slide. And they can use it the same amount of times as you could any of the other ones. You know, starts at 2, get a 3rd one eventually. But again, it's the idea of this general healing ability, go ahead and spend a healing surge, you know, is a classic ability of most leaders. They'd have a multi-class versatility. That's number 4 here. You can choose a class-specific multi-class feat from more than one class. I've sort of talked about multi-classing with the multi-class feat rather than the... We kind of... Again, last week when we talked about it, we talked about the hybrid classes. That's an entirely different thing. I wonder where the last time I talked about the hybrid classes. Multi-classing is not hybrid classes. It's different. It's feat-based, and you gain abilities of a class. Normally, you have to qualify for it. Basically, Bard says, and you can only take 1 normally. Bard says you can have more than 1. So, yeah. It's a simple thing. It's if you want to dabble into a little bit more of the multi-classing feat chains and stuff like that, that is an opportunity for it. I might do a specific mini video while talking about those, or add it in at the end of all the other class things. And I'll say, hey, let's add in multiplayer. We talked about multi-classing. We talked about the hybrid classes already in a previous video. But it's an interesting option that they can take more than 1. Normally, you're restricted to 1. But again, the Bard can be like, I can be a little bit of fighter, I can be a little bit of rogue, so I'm a little bit of defender, a little bit of striker added into my abilities. While, yes, you know, normally it's like, I'm this. Like, I played a character that did a little bit of multi-classing. I was Warlock with a little bit of sorcerer feats. Skill versatility. You get +1 bonus to untrained skill checks. That's it. It's a pretty good bonus. Honestly speaking, it's not bad. It helps out. And then you get Song of Rest as your number 6 ability. God, we're not done yet with Bard. You can play an instrument or sing for a short period of time, and each ally that can hear you affected by the Song of is affected by the Song of Rest. And when they spend healing surges at the end of a rest, they regain additional hit points equal to your charisma modifier with each of those healing surges. And a character can only be affected by 1 Song of Rest at a time, so if you have multiple bards, it doesn't really matter. But that's an interesting thing that, oh, hey, we're resting up, we're taking our, rest to regain some hit points, to spend healing surges and stuff like that in between combats. Hey, I can do a little I can strum my lute, I can sing my song, and each of those healing surges get my charisma bonus as a bonus. Finally, we have Words of Friendship. So they can use their magic and their honeyed words to turn the Synchro's Ardent into compelling oration. and they gain the Words of Friendship power. Okay, let's talk about Words of Friendship. It's an encounter power that's a minor action that you gain a +5 bonus to diplomacy checks before the end of your next turn. So this is a very out of combat, actually, power that bards get, which is very interesting. You know, a lot of powers a lot of classes get tend to be very drawn on to specific classes. Off the top of my head, I do not, unfortunately. Like, if you want to say your previous account, you know, maybe I'd recognize it. But again, hi, welcome. You know, I'm glad, you know, learning about some tabletop can help you, or just watching me do some stuff. Anyway. Let's move on, though. Now, there is another second edition one to talk about, but I want to move into, because the order of where I got my information gave us the Eberron 1, 2. So, hey, we're going to move on to the Player's Guide to Eberron, and we'll come back to Player's Handbook 2 in a second, as we talk about Artificers. Hey, everybody remembers Artificers in 5e. Guess what? They were in 4e too. It turns out, you know, Artificer has a long history. Artificer. So, again, arcane power. Guess what? You're doing arcane again. But they use, like, rather than song, music, lyrics, you're like ancient arcane recipes and alchemy stuff, and knowing about magic items. And then you use your arcane power into items that you kind of like, here you go, use this. This will help you on your way. And again, very similar to Bard, being arcane kind of gives you that controller aspect a little bit. Bonuses to Fort Will, 12, 5. And then, of course, healing surges. 6+. So, they get a couple of abilities, too, similarly to all the rest. Oh my god, this is actually a little... The Eberron book just is done a little bit weirder than the others. Their basic types are Tinker and Battlesmith. They, again, implements are a thing to look into here. But they get 4 abilities. Only 4, so they're nowhere near a goddamn Bard, and there's 7. So they get Arcane Empowerment is the first ability. Oh, Arcane Empowerment, Arcane Rejuvenation, a Healing Infusion, and Ritual Casting. So Arcane Empowerment. What the hell is that? Well, similarly speaking to many other abilities we have here, they're studying magic, manipulating arcane energies within items. And at the beginning of each day, they have the ability to empower a magical item and gain 1 additional arcane empowerment for each milestone they reach. You can spend a short rest with the item in order to empower it. And you can empower the item in 2 different ways. So, again, this is an important thing here. The milestones are your chunks of levels. 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30. So, you'd think about it that way. It basically means per group of stuff, you can either grant a bonus to 1, 2, or 3 magic items. That's pretty dark. Sorry about that. Okay. The 2 ways that you empower the items are impart energy or augment energy. Impart energy is you reclaim the daily power of a magic item. A magic item can only be recharged once per day this way. And remember, you're either getting this 1, 2, or 3 times per day, and during a short rest, not a long rest, you can empower the magic item. So, like, this first one is, I get another use of a daily power. And the second one is the augment energy, as you can infuse a weapon or implement with a reservoir of energy that lasts until your next extended rest or until it's expended. And there's a free action when making an attack roll. They can spend the reservoir to gain a +2 bonus to attack rolls, basically. So it's a way of, basically, you can either grant a bonus or recharge something. And per short rest, you can do that once, twice or 3 times, depending on your level. Arcane Rejuvenation. So that's curative things. You expend time infusing the allies' magic items with curative energy. And when they use an magic item's daily power, the item absorbs the energy. The ally absorbs the energy and gains temporary hit points equal to 1/2 your level, plus intelligence modifier. This is the one of, this is not the healing ability. This is the idea of, oh hey, you know, I'm going to empower your magic item before combat. And, you know, you're doing this with your allies, and they use a daily power. They gain some temporary hit points. Pretty good. And if you want to know, for me, I've been playing D&D for like 30 years now, probably. I was very young, 30 plus. So healing infusion. This is creating a healing infusion for later use. And yes. So at the end of an extended rest, you create 2 healing infusions that last until the next extended rest, and then you create 3. It's going to be like the healing abilities of the other ones, except you basically pull a little bit of an alchemist and create like potions. So again, it's that same thing of still healing. So yeah. And the effect of the healing diffusion is determined at the time when you use the power, not the time when you create it. So there are 2 uses of it that, you know, when you use the healing infusion power, you extend one of your infusions and create an effect that lasts until an extended rest. During a short rest, an ally can spend healing surges to replenish one of the infusions extended. So again, like, you get these, to explain it in an interesting way, I have 2 or 3 infusions. Okay, I use it, it gives a bonus until my extended long rest. But during a short rest, if someone wants to give up a healing surge, me or an ally, I get one of them back, of my maximum 2 or 3. So, the creative admixture is one of them, and that's the healing surge plus wisdom modifier, and you know, expends an infusion class feature, and it's the exact same as any of the other healing. That's a curative admixture. It's an interesting that it can be recharged. You know, if someone else later on wants to give up their healing surge, you know, it comes back. Because they are an encounter ability, but you have a limited number of them technically per long rest. But people can then, you know, or extend rest. But you can, during a short rest, recharge them by giving up healing, you know, healing surges. So it's an interesting take on the entire, you know, normal ones that are kind of more encounter powers. Yeah. And then, of course, you have the Healing Infusion's resistive formula, which is the different one, which, as a minor action, one ally in burst, gets a +1 bonus to AC until the end of the encounter, and you expend the Healing Infusion class feature. The target can end the bonus as a free action to gain temporary hit points equal to its healing surge value plus your Constitution modifier. And that temporary hit points increases. And again, that's another interesting one of like, oh, you get a bonus, but you can switch it to temporary hit points rather than a full heal, you know, if you want to, but you're using it ahead of time. So one of them is like a after stuff, and the one is ahead of time. Ritual casting is the last thing you get as a Artificer. So, yep. And it contains a number of specific rituals, though. So if you'd want to check that out, that is what you'd have. The ritual book contains the following rituals: Brew Potion, Disenchant Magic Item, Enchant Magic Item, Make Whole. And you can use the Disenchant without expending components. So keep that in mind. Whew! Alright. Now, Artificers can summon, so there's an entire section in there for looking into summoning, so if you want to look that up and learn about that, just, that's there too. Alright, so we move on to, of course, another leader. Post-Artificer. We've moved through a lot of these already. We still have a couple more to go. Shamans. We're back to Player's Handbook 2. Talk about Shamans, though. So, Shamans use the spirits of the natural world, their primal abilities, they manifest powers, so they're very spirit-based. They have a spirit companion that boasters and hears known by allies, and they can invoke other spirits around to help the allies or harm opponents. So they, unlike the other ones, which were the last two I talked about, which kind of hint at controller, a shaman, because of its build, could go a little defender, could go a little bit of striker, depending on their situation. Our key abilities are Wisdom, Constitution, Intelligence, bonus to Fort and Will, 12 plus Con, 5, 7 for their hit point stuff. And they have 3 abilities. Oh my god, thank you for having 3 and not goddamn 7. So much for Bard. So much for Bard. You know, Bards just are like that. So, they're battle leaders again. It's what a leader is. They use the spirits to lead their allies. Natural spirits booster them, protect them, all that kind of stuff. And they've got rites of passage that they pledge themselves to various spirits, hear their voices, and kind of use them in their natural abilities. So, their class features, and there's definitely 5 of them we'll talk about here. Companion spirit. It's a companion spirit that accompanies you, assists you. So, powers of a shaman will have the spirit keyword when it needs the spirit present. They get you call spirit companion power, which is a at-will power, where you conjure a spirit in an unoccupied square in a burst of 20 feet away from you. It lasts until the spirit falls unconscious, or until he misses a minor action. It occupies a square. Enemies can't move through it, and you can move actions to move it around. And it does kind of have hit points, but not. You know, it sort of does. It has to take a certain amount of damage per attack to get rid of it. So that's the spirit companion that you get. Then you draw on the spirits of the bear, or a similar protective spirit, to defend and bolster your allies, where it comes into 3 kind of things. You get Spirit Boom, Spirit Shield, at-will power. There's Protector Spirit. Spirit Boom is when an ally adjacent to your spirit companion regains hit points equal to your Constitution modifier when you use the second wind, or when you use a healing power on him or her. The Spirit Shield, you gain the Spirit Shield power, an attack which you make through your spirit companion as an opportunity action, and you also gain the at-will protecting strike power, and you choose a second at-will power. So basically, you only get 1 at-will power normally that you choose from, and the other ones you get, which are the Spirit Shield and the Protecting Strike. Protecting Strike being a damage wing one that goes from your spirit damaging things, and the Spirit Shield, which helps regain hit points. Stalker Spirit. So this one, you call him Panther Spirit for stealth and cunning. So you get to choose either Protector Spirit or Stalker Spirit. I'm sorry, that's part of Companion Spirit. The Stalker Spirit is different than the other one. Sorry about that. And there are custom Spirit Companion rules anyway, where it gets a Spirit Boon, adjacent allies, do bonus damage to bloody targets equal to your Intelligence modifier, and then you gain the Spirit Fangs power, and the attack at will power would be Stalker Strike plus the second one. So the type of Companion Spirit determines one of your basic powers, your at-will powers, plus it gives you an additional class feature power, either Spirit's Fangs or Spirit Shield. Then you also get the Healing Spirit, which you get the Healing Spirit power, which, guess what the Healing Spirit power is? It's the same as all the other healing abilities. Healing Surge, regains an extra hit points, twice per encounter, eventually third. Yeah, it's the same. They keep the same. And then you get also Speak with Spirits power. You are aware of spirits around you and can kind of talk with them. It is a encounter power. You get a bonus to your next skill check equal to your Wisdom modifier. So it's another one, similar to the Bard one, that can be very out of combat. Getting an extra bonus of your Wisdom modifier to a skill check. Pretty cool. Of course, you'd have to do a short rest to regain it, but yeah. Ardent. We only got a couple more left that we're really going to dive deep into today. And we're moving away from Player's Handbook 2 to Player's Handbook 3. Guess what? We're getting some psionic people. Sorry I'm not interactive, but your conversations go outside the purview of what we're doing here today. So, sorry. I'm not going to interact with the conversations that they're going to be like this. If you want to talk about what we're talking about, you're free to be here. But if not, no. Another leader, an Ardent. They filled them with the will to fight and the need for victory through psionic abilities. They're spirit warriors that thoughts swirl and infect enemies. You know, bonus to charisma, constitution, wisdom are the key ability modifiers. Bonus to fortitude and will. 12, 5, 7 for scores. So yeah. Their control emotions, fear, lust, greed, hatred, and they kind of use those to weaken the enemies while kind of removing them from their allies. You know, so they kind of manipulate the energies in there. And again, another one, they have a little bit of secondary defender or striker, depending on class choices here, too. There's rarely formal art for an Ardent that kind of stumble onto psychic powers and kind of develop them for an Ardent. I talked about psionic augmentation a little bit previously. We're not getting into depths about psionic augmentation. It's the ability to have a number of power points because you're psionic, and you can use those power points to augment your various abilities. Okay, that's the simplest part of it. Guess what? They're a psionic class. They have psionic augmentation. Then you get two other abilities, Ardent Surge and Ardent Mantle. Okay? Cool. Great. So a person's state of mind can armor them against decay and madness and emotions and kind of stuff. So you get one of a choice with Ardent Mantle. The Mantle of Clarity, Mantle of Elation. You can choose one. And, you know, it gives a benefit to your allies. So if you choose the Mantle of Clarity, you and each ally within 5 squares of you gain a bonus to all defenses against opportunity attacks equal to your Wisdom modifier. And in addition, if an ally with 5 speaks of you gains a +2 bonus to Insight and Perception checks. You also get the Ardent Alacrity power, which the Ardent Alacrity is a encounter power. You are bloodied by an attack, and each ally in a burst around you can use a free action either to shift 1 square or move half their speed. So, you know, it's sort of like, they've wounded me! Come to my aid, my allies! That's what it is. That's the Mantle of Clarity. Or you can go Mantle of Elation, which you and each ally of 5 squares get bonus to damage rolls for opportunity attack. So one of them you're protected against opportunity, the other you do opportunity. And that bonus is equal to your Con modifier instead of your Wisdom modifier. Again, 2 different ability scores. You choose which one you want to be. And then each ally in 5 gets a +2 to diplomacy and intimidate checks. So again, both of these bonuses, if they're close to you, are very good out of combat things in general. And that one you get the Ardent Outrage power. The Ardent Outrage is when you become bloodied. Each enemy in a burst grants combat advantage at the start of your next turn. So they become like kind of weakened. And then you get Ardent Surge. You can use advanced emotional state to inspire or motivate their allies to recover from their injuries. It's the healing of a leader. Once again, Healing Surge plus 1d6 additional hit points. And then you also, depending on which mantle you do, you get an additional bonus for those. So keep that in mind. If you're Clarity, they get +1 defense until the end of your next turn, and if you're Elation, they get +1 attack until the end of your next turn. So, again, it's the I heal you, but a little bit, and that's kind of how each of these things. It's I heal, but do a little bit of different things. The types are Enlightened or Euphoric Ardent are the 2 basic types you can look at. And the main group here, of course, we go over to Ruenpriest. Let me get a picture of our Ruenpriest here, our last leader from this book here. And we're going to be talking about a few other leaders, kind of, sort of, there. There's a few others to mention and talk about for a little bit, but we're not going to go as depth about them because they're from later books, and there's a lot less of them, and they're just different versions of older stuff with slightly different abilities. So that's why we're got kind of like sort of like the hybrid class I already talked about. That I already talked about these, but Ruenpriests, they're divine. They use divine runes, a powerful artifact that are to form the basis of a deity's powers. There are other runic structures, but you've mastered the runes of the gods. And you can impart those runes to give strength or vitality to your allies while leaving enemies open to attacks. And they go towards defender or controller with choices. So interestingly enough, we had a lot of, oh, I go a little bit to defender, striker, just controller. This one either defender or controller, dependent choices. Get just bonuses to will, 12, 5, 7, staying with all the kind of ones. So basically, they're in sacred forges, holy libraries. They find the secrets of these runes of divine powers. You know, they're a set of runes crafted by the gods, imbued with their divine power, helping giving the world power. And during the wars against the primordials, many runes were lost. And some gods even dimly recall the runes and the powers they had, you know. So they're forgotten in depths of the world, and through runesmithing, you've kind of become a master, relearned things, discovered things, and stuff like that. You dove into the depths of these ancient runes. So they're got 3 main class features: Rune Master, Rune of Mending, and Runic Artistry. I'm going to tell you, you know what Rune of Mending is. We're going to talk about it again. It's there. Defiant Ruenpriest and Wrathful Ruenpriest are the 2 basic builds if you want to look at those. Rune Master. Okay. So this is some of your powers have the runic keyword. When you're going to use a runic power, you choose one of the runes noted in your power, either Rune of Destruction or Rune of Protection, and then you use the power. And choosing the rune's effect. And the moment you choose the rune, you enter the rune state. You remain in the rune state until you enter another rune state or until the end of the encounter. Does that make sense? Okay. Basically, I use a runic power, I enter into a rune state, I stick with that rune state until the end of the encounter, or I use another runic power and choose to use a different rune to replace it. Okay? Great. And when you're in the Rune of Destruction's rune state or the Rune of Protection's rune state, you gain additional benefit. And again, those runic powers, depending on the rune you choose, have additional abilities. So it's like, I'm just choosing Destruction or Protection for my runic power I'm using. Okay, cool. It's getting an additional bonus, depending on which direction I want to choose when I use that power. But I'm also granting myself that runic state of a bonus. So if you do the runic destructions and you go into that runic state, allies gain a +1 bonus to attack rolls against enemies that are adjacent to you, or any other Ruenpriest that are in this rune state. So if you have another Ruenpriest in Rune of Destruction, they'd also get that bonus. Rune of Protection is when adjacent to you, allies resist 2 to all damage, which increases. So basically it's like, stand next to me and you take less damage. Cool. Okay. So it grants you these bonuses. You use a rune power, you go into a rune state, you get rune stuff. Rune of Mending. It's their healing ability. And it does link to the 2 runes you have and rune states. So again, it's the normal, you spend a healing surge, but in this case, it's the one that only goes up to 5d6 because it takes to the first level up of the power to get an additional d6. Why? You got runes. Again, still 2 normally. Use once per round, 2 normally. 3 times per encounter later on. And it's a counter abilities. Rune of Destruction is you and each ally in the burst gain +2 bonus to damage rolls or levels up until the end of the next turn. In Rune of Protection, they get a +1 bonus to all defenses until the end of your next turn. So very interestingly, you can choose to, I've healed you. It's not as good of a bonus, but I grant everybody around us a bonus to damage. Or I heal you, not as good as it could get up to, but I also give us all a bonus to defenses until the end of my next turn. So little big boosts there. Pretty good, interesting idea. Kind of makes Ruenpriest a little different. I always like these little different things that make the healing more unique for people. Runic Artistry. So you follow one of 2 major traditions of rune magic. The Wrathful Hammer or Defiant Word. They use the same runes, but have different practices and teaching, and you have to choose one of them. If you choose Defiant Word, Whenever an enemy misses you with an attack, you gain a bonus to damage rolls against that enemy until the end of your next turn. The bonus is equal to your wisdom modifier, and regardless of the number of times the enemy misses you in a round. So it doesn't stack up, it's just that one bonus, but the more things that miss you, the more bonus of damage you have against more targets, basically. And then the Wrathful Hammer is you gain a proficiency with military hammers and military maces. And when when an enemy deals damage to you with an attack, you gain a bonus on damage rolls against that enemy until the end of your next turn. And the bonus is equal to your con modifier. And again, it maxes out at that. You don't stack that up. It's regardless of the number of times you're hit. So one of them is you miss, and one of them is you hit for bonuses. So you can see why strength, con, and whiz are important strength, because you're also going to be hitting things with a hammer or similar weapon. It's going to happen a bunch. The basic attacks you use are going to use a lot of bonuses of strength. So, yeah. But that's Ruenpriest. Now we have 3 more I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to be very brief on them. First off, we have the Warpriest, which is a different version of Cleric. Now this comes from the Heroes of the Fallen Land book. Again, these are a couple of books that were at the back end of 4E that I've not really ever really seen a lot of. If you want to dive into it, it's giving you a different version and character options for Cleric and a couple other classes. In this case, the Warpriest is a different option for Clerics. Secondly speaking, we have another interesting one just like that. We have a Druid, the Sentinel Druid. Again, this is another alternate version of it. It's a leader version of a Druid. So here's where it's very interesting. Remember, Druid was a controller before. Cleric, okay, Warpriest, it's another version of a Cleric. This is a different version of a Druid, which actually shows up in 2 versions of it. There's the Druid Sentinel that happens in Heroes of the Forgotten Kingdom, and also in one of the Dragon magazines that came up with a hybrid Druid Sentinel for the leader too. But this is, if you want to have a leader version of a Druid, and have some powers very similar to the original Druid there, but kind of updated, this would be the place to look into it at. Finally, the book, when we move on to the last image here, which is a Skald Bard. It's another version of a Bard. This is a leader, but has 2 power sources. We're not just Arcane now, we're Arcane and Martial. So that's why it's a separate one. It's a different version of a Bard with slightly different abilities from Heroes of the Feywild. Again, these 3 books were from the back end of it. These were after Player's Handbook 3. We are getting to the 2010s. We're at the back end of, the time period for a lot of 40. 40 didn't last as long as you'd think it would be. It's just an unfortunate thing that, it's 4 years from now, in the time period, that's when, 5e comes out. We're at the back end of when people are putting out a lot of major books for it. Some of these things, like the hybrid Druid Sentinel, happened in June of 2011 in Dragon magazine. And, things like Here's the Feywild would have been the back end when we're getting into 2011. We are finally kind of leading to the end of a lot of 5e, 4e. But yeah, that's the basics there. Yes, and Heroes of the Feywild would be probably, I don't know if it's one of the last books released, but it is one of the back-end supplements. So we still had something introduced there. That's very interesting. And again, I don't have enough on these books to dive into them like I have, as other books. And it's an unfortunate thing that, I can mention them and shout them out. But again, they are versions of stuff we've already talked about. And you can see that there are very heavy similarities between the way all leaders work. Granted, the little things become in the little scatterings of other types, when we hit the Cleric and Warlord, we're very standard leader, and then we begin like Bard, Artificer, sprinkling a little Controller, Shaman, Ardent, we're sprinkling in maybe a little bit of Defender or Striker. Oh, Ruenpriest, we're sprinkling maybe a little bit Defender, Controller. You know, we're sprinkling a little bit of stuff in to alter the way that these happen, that they're still a leader, but they have a little bit of other abilities. Like if you're a leader Striker, you go, oh, you're doing a little bit more damage. You're outputting a little bit more. You're leader Defender. Oh, you're, you know, making sure everybody's like a little bolstered up a little bit more. Leader Controller, you're moving board around a little bit too. And all these advantages kind of manipulate the way that a leader works. And a lot of times their basic healing power, which all of them have, which functionally are the exact same across the board, differs just by a little bit. Each of them is just a little bit different, and that's what makes them unique. It makes it that I have this bonus, this bonus, this bonus, this bonus when I'm healing people. And some of them are very creative and interesting. Like, I think the Artificer one is one of the more creative ones, where you have to, honestly, you don't regain them the same way. You have to manage by giving up healing surges to have more of them, but you then have two entirely different options because of this limitation in a way that kind of exists, that, you know, you still have to have that actual rest to get them back. Well, again, like, it's also, like, you normally have to rest to get them back for the encounter powers anyway. But it's just this weird difference in the way you work on them. It's like, you spend ahead of time. And I think that's really cool. That each of these has a very different feeling, but is, generally speaking, you can tell by me talking about them here, the same role. You know, I can't deny that none of these are leaders. They heal, grant bonuses to their allies, and oftentimes are there waiting into battle next to the defenders, because a lot of their bonuses require them being close enough to get those bonuses to those defenders or those attackers, the strikers, and whoever is there. And it makes for interesting character combat. And you can see why leaders are still very important. It's that thing of, like I talked about, I'm going to be going through these in the order that I feel like the roles are the most important. Naturally speaking, to like how they go. Defenders are pretty important because they, well, form the basis of keeping enemies in check from not attacking everybody. That's pretty important. But they kind of tie with leaders who are there granting a lot of defensive bonuses and honestly keeping people alive with some on-the-spot healing. So that's why the two of those are very introductory. And then, of course, you get strikers who are damage dealers and controllers who move the board around, manipulate things. And you can see how we're walking away from critical importance a lot of times here. But anyway, I like leaders. 40's fun to talk about. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry about any of the interruptions and stuff today. It was a very busy day here on stream for once, with kitties and interesting people in chat and stuff like that. And, you know, I'm going to say to all of you out there, thank you for joining me. You know, check out all my other stuff. I have a scheduled stuff. The tabletop stuff that's up on Twitch is normally Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays/Saturdays, depending on which day I can do those. All those, you know, tend to be around the noon o'clock time, sometimes later, depending on life stuff. I have Crimson Queen, Wednesdays, 9 p.m. EST, live play of Pathfinder 1st Edition, discussing tabletop on Saturdays, do gaming stuff on other days on Twitch, and, you know, all the tabletop stuff goes up on YouTube, Discord and Twitter for social media, down linked below, and that's all the shout-outs. Okay, everybody, I hope you had a great day. Until the next time I see any of you, I bid you all a farewell.